Luc Ches, born 1936 in Lausanne. After photo classes in Vevey, he exiled himself to Cuba, where he worked for the Prensa Latina agency. He became the photographer of Fidel Castro and Che Guevara. In the 1970s, he returned to Switzerland, dedicating himself to depicting modern reality in publications such as Swiss Life.
Jazz
was actually the passion of my life above that of photography. I couldn't earn my living as a jazz musician. You see, you have to be really talented, and it's always risky. Whereas photography at that time was a profession. To be Swiss meant you were starting out on the right foot, because there was a very established tradition of Swiss photography. Why this picture? Well, it seemed to me that it worked relatively well. Perhaps the contrast between this established photographer in his apartment and then this Mozambican child wandering in a paddy field. This seemed to be a possible contrast. No, I'm not a beatnik. I am, however, a third worldist. You see, if I set off for Cuba, I would really go for ideological reasons. If I could, I would like best that this picture be preserved. You see, if I could move through the decades having those physical aspects, it would be great. Well, it's in Cuba that I really educated myself, because I had been to school in Vevey, where it was nevertheless enormously normalized with their professors, who were old fuddy-duddies. I had to leave here because it was a society so stifling, strict, and I thought, like some of my generation, that salvation would come from the third world. That's to say that third world revolutions should spread here in order to change things here, where everything appeared to be really fossilized. And then in Cuba, I plunged into a country where everything is equal. It was a land suitable for questioning again the golden rule and the mechanisms we had learned here. After a year, I was already more attached to Cuba than to Lausanne. I stayed there for 14 years.
Ches in 1963 was the official photographer of Ernesto Che Guevara in Cuba.
No, it isn't diminished, but I understand that in fact there is a sort of renewed interest, it seems, I don't know why, since about 1 year surrounding Che. Many books have come out that are certainly very beautiful and very interesting. The Cuban period ends in '75 with my return here. My compensation on leaving is my archives, which allow me to work and make an exhibition, a book, and a film.
Our earth, our Mother Nature, belonged to everyone. Each family had a dwelling and use of the fields for the necessities of life. The community looked after the welfare of the old and infirm. Our forefathers cultivated the sacred corn on the rich plains, which they knew would bring a good yield by praying to the favorable gods and by diverting the rivers. But the sky clouded over. The conquerors enslaved us. They stole our plains. With our blood and tears, they sowed vast fields of cotton and sugarcane. And these riches born of our entrails were transported in large boats to the other side of the world, to cities with names we didn't know and would never see.
What really bothered me on my return after so many years spent in Latin America and in Africa after, it's this isolation, non-communication between people. And in the bus, actually, this is probably the best place to see the difficulty people have in communicating. This is a book showing Switzerland as very austere, inorganic, which is not the country I like. There, it's obvious. But to me, it felt just like that in the 80s when I did it, after having lived for so long in countries much more open. Time passes, I have changed, and the country has changed also, I think. Vidi, this was done in 2002 to 2003, and at that point it was not Switzerland, but Lausanne that concerned me. It has changed a lot, this hybrid city, and the objective in my work is exactly this multiculturality. It has a much more pleasant side to it at the beach in Vidi than in the Bahnhofstrasse or the Swiss Alps.
Well, some are in photography and others in geography.
Ah, d'accord.
Voilà.
Merci.
I knew Latin America very well, where I traveled a great deal. I knew Africa, Africa at war through the International Red Cross, and Africa through aid development. But I had never set foot in Asia, for example. The idea I had there, I wanted to see the entire world, and that's why I concocted this project. At Cap Haitien in Haiti on a beach, you see an old man, obviously ill, who has dug his grave and who is in the process of burying himself alive. And two students who pass by on their way to school are indifferent to it. One photo like that may be able to provoke a pang of conscience in people and contribute to it not happening again. Good, because I have had an education perhaps ideological. I think also it is essential to avoid letting situations like that happen again. It has to be more fair and right. At the beginning of the Cuban Revolution, it was to change the order of things on the planet, rather than simply giving food to the 2 out of 3 people who were hungry.
Donner à manger à 2 ou 3 personnes qui ont faim.
You can always say that I would like to have done better. I could also have done nothing at all. I could have just stayed and developed films at Kodak, because that is what I did for a while after leaving school. I feel I have been responsible for my life. I don't have a secret drawer like some photographers have with books that have not been published. In this respect, books, exhibitions, I have really done what I wanted to do.
Del Castro and Che Guevara. In the 1970s, he returned to Switzerland, dedicating himself to depicting modern reality in publications such as Swiss Life.
Jazz was actually the passion of my life above that of photography. I couldn't earn my living as a jazz musician. You see, you have to be really talented, and it's always risky. Whereas photography at that time was a profession. To be Swiss meant you were starting out on the right foot, because there was a very established tradition of Swiss photography.
Luc Ches, born 1936 in Lausanne. After photo classes in Vevey, he exiled himself to Cuba, where he worked for the Prensa Latina agency. He became the photographer of